All right, welcome back to VP Culture Emotional Science. This is lesson number 2, and let's dive into this lesson. This lesson is about what is an emotion. So we're going to be talking about this for the entire time, so we better figure out what an emotion is specifically. So, can we identify what an emotion is? That's the big question here. Can you define what it is, and can you identify it when you see one, when you feel one in yourself, and when you see it in others? So we're going to give you a simple model to help reduce emotions from this complex sort of like, oh my gosh, what is all this stuff? To the point where most leaders, managers just like, I don't want to deal with that. That's crazy stuff. It's not crazy stuff. It's stuff that we all experience every single day. And there's a simple way to look at it. So this is a model that has been used since the 1980s. So it's been over 40 years of being tested scientifically, and it's found itself to be a very effective model of dealing with what is an emotion. So it simply has two axes. So it's excited physically or down physically. That's a pretty easy judgment to understand. And so I always help people to start focusing on this axis. Do I have energy, or am I tired? Do I feel like I'm going to get up and go, or I feel like I'm just wiped out? Pretty easy to understand. So that's the first primary plane of your emotional world, and a very simple world to just ask people about. Like, hey, are you feeling energized right now? And hey, how are your batteries? Are they kind of worn out? Hey, you look a little bit tired right now. Those are some very simple questions you could do that don't offend people, and because usually people can access that information pretty easily. Like, yeah, I'm feeling kind of tired. No, I'm doing all right. Had a tough morning, but still have some energy. Had some good lunch, and I'm back. I'm bouncing back. So the energy axis: excited physically, down physically. Now the other axis is a little bit more complicated: positive thoughts, negative thoughts. So negative on this side, positive on this side. So this is the realm of emotions. If you can just figure out these two planes, like, so what did you think about it? What did you think about this? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? So let me give you some examples here on this chart. So you could be excited physically and have positive thinking. That means you're happy, you're joyful, you're moving towards something, excited. So I might say, I'm excited. But you could also be excited physically. You have physical energy and think this is bad. So you might be anxious. You might be fearful. You might be angry. So angry is actually a state of high energy, but this isn't good. It's a state that is engaging you to try to push away something that you don't think is good or something that's not fair. So you're angry. So that's high physical energy and negative thinking. You see how simple this works out? And, if you don't have a ton of high physical energy, but it's positive, it might be just like, hey, it's good. It's just, I'm not super excited, but, generally I'm positive about this. Now, what if you're down physically? And let's start off with the negative. This is going to be like, I'm feeling sad. Usually sadness drains the energy out of you. You don't go like, hey, I'm sad. I think I'll go out and run a mile. It's not the way it goes. Usually you can sense that you're down energy, and you're not liking that. If you get into full-on low energy that's chronic and it's not good, you're going to end up being depressed. So depressed, grief, sadness, sorrow, those type of things. But what if you're positive about feeling down? And you're thinking, positive about feeling down? This is like you're feeling chill. You're feeling relaxed. You're on the beach with your Mai Tai, so you're just chilling in the lounge chair. You're feeling relaxed. You're not super energized. You're calm. You're peaceful. You're like, oh, this is great. So that would be joy, peace, more chill, relaxation, satisfaction, all of these different things. So that kind of gives you an idea of how this chart works. And we're going to be diving deeper into each one of these different axes here as we explore what an emotion is in greater depth. So you need to focus on your emotional state. How are you feeling? So you need to take this part of your brain needs to become an observer not enmeshed in the whole emotional process, and it is an observer. You can kind of detach yourself and go, oh, okay, so I'm feeling that emotional energy, and I think it's a good thing. We don't typically do that. We just sort of say, I'm happy, I'm excited, I'm feeling, pumped about this thing. So that's generally typically what we do. The other thing about focusing is we're moving into focus and not control. Not control. So the control is like, oh, I have to stop this emotion. Oh, I have to. No, just notice it, observe it. Those are some other words. Perceive it. It's all about using your sense of like what's going on. Because remember, a lot of your reactive emotions are just going to happen in your life, and you don't have a complete control over that. So it's better to observe and then decide what you want to do after you observe and focus on it. Great. Okay. So what we're not talking about here, the workplace emotional world we're not trying to promote sort of this super reactive emotionalism. Like we have to run around with drama all day long, reacting and crying and sharing all our feelings and everything like that. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about getting into emotional therapy sessions with each other. It's not about that. It's just simply identifying where am I going. The workplace is usually a little bit more simple, plain. And where am I going? How am I feeling? Can I move from here to there? And those types of things. We're going to take an observer status, and then we're going to take a secondary look later on in the chapter is how to be proactive emotionally and move towards your values. So there'll be a bit of a pivot that happens, like away from just being reactive, understanding the reactive world situation. It's giving us some information, and then moving into the how do I act out of my values rather than just freaking out and responding to every emotional situation in this kind of cathartic, oh no, we just have to be emotional all the time. This is a more emotionally intelligent response where you're not feeling emotions. You're allowing yourself to feel them within a non-judgmental way, but then you're observing so that you can move beyond just like whatever the current reaction might be. So that's critical. Moving from reactivity and sort of craziness, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a very emotionally intelligent approach that allows you to sort of not control, but master the world of emotions. Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit into the science here. Not going to dwell too long on this. Dr. James Russell was the one that came up with this in the 1980s. And of course, in scientific language, we call it the circumflex instead of just like a chart. So you've got sort of this circular shape, and in your typical science name, you have arousal. That means how physically are you excited or are you not excited? So I tend to dumb it down for us here. And then they use valence, which means do you like this or don't you? So negative valence means it's yucky. We don't like it. Positive valence is I like this. This is good. I'll move towards it. So same sort of thing. You'll see some tense, angry, distressed. Those are when your body is excited, but you don't like it. Those are some that we mentioned before. Again, we don't like it and we're feeling down arousal, sad, depressed, bored. And then on the positive side, when we think things are good and we're not super excited physically, we get calm, relaxed, content. Then moving into the next one, when things are positive and we start to get excited, happy, excited, alert. So those are all different ways and you could put hundreds of emotions. Every single emotion that you can feel fits on this chart. That's why it's so effective to use as a tool scientifically for scientists throughout the ages. So it's been a great way for us to describe this, and it's been in use for nearly 40 years in research, and it stood the time of scrutiny of the scientific world. So it stands up with great rigor. Moving on to our story time again. And again, just to emphasize the motivational interviewing, we're moving from ambivalence to change. Now, ambivalence means like, I'm not sure if I like this or not. On the one hand, I like this. On the other hand, I like that. So you're helping people move from, I'm not sure where I want to go, to an emotional place of, I feel good about moving in this direction. But you're helping them explore that, okay? So open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summary. So open-ended questions start with a how or a what. typically, and they elicit a non-yes or no answer, an expansive answer that will help the person explore what they're thinking about. Okay? And remember, you're trying to get them to change, so you're helping them explore their options in these stories. So let's introduce our story. It's between Jill and Thomas, who are in the medical field, and they're going to have a discussion. So let's dive into this story.
Jill was a leader in a medical facility.
Thomas, a diligent worker, was struggling with a procedure that involved using X-rays. The procedure was potentially harmful due to radiation exposure, and it was also costly. Thomas knew that a new 3D ultrasound could possibly do it for less and with less radiation. However, Thomas had fears that the other staff would give him negative feedback if he suggested changing the procedure.
Instead of telling Thomas what to do, Jill decided to use motivational interviewing. She started by asking Thomas open-ended questions about the procedure and his concerns. She listened empathetically, reflecting back his concerns about radiation, cost, and potential backlash from colleagues. Next, Jill helped Thomas envision a better future. She asked, how would things look if we could reduce both the cost and radiation exposure? Thomas shared his ideas, and Jill listened, encouraging him to explore these further. Then Jill asked Thomas about his ambivalence. She asked, what do you think is holding you back from suggesting the use of 3D ultrasound?
Thomas shared his fears about negative feedback.
Jill acknowledged his fears, validating his feelings, but also gently challenging his assumptions. Finally, Jill encouraged Thomas to make a plan. She asked, what's one small step you could take towards this change?
Thomas thought for a moment, then shared a simple but effective idea to present the benefits of 3D ultrasound to his colleagues.
Jill affirmed his plan and offered her support.
In the weeks that followed, Thomas implemented his plan. He presented his findings to his colleagues, addressing their concerns and highlighting the benefits of 3D ultrasound. The procedure improved, radiation exposure reduced, and costs were cut.
All because Jill chose to guide rather than dictate, to listen rather than tell.
So I could hope you could see some of the open-ended questions, the affirmations and the reflections. Reflections are kind of neat. They're just sort of like, so you said this? And then that elicits somebody's response to dive deeper into that. So those are the tools that you can use to have good emotional questioning, good emotional discussions within your team. All right, let's look at our group questions. First group question. Identify more emotions that fit in the 4 quadrants. So look back at that chart and see if you can put some more emotions that fit somewhere within those charts. Question number 2. What are things that physically energize you at work? Question number 3. What do you think are the elements of work that you value the most? So that gets into your thoughts. What are you thinking about? Explore that with your team. Which do you prefer, being calm or energized? So explore these questions with your team to get a better idea of how your emotions are fitting within that identifier chart that we just looked at. So that brings us to the end of lesson number 2. What is an emotion? We're giving you a very simple chart that will give you the ability to discern, to focus on what your emotional state is and hopefully what the emotional state of others are. So thanks for joining me with the second lesson of emotional science. So join me again at the next lesson, lesson number 3.